Yo guys, what is good? Welcome back to the Uncle Sharma channel. Here for a very, very special preview. I'm very excited. I don't think I've been this excited about a guest I have on. This is a voice that I'm sure many of you have to have heard Patrick's voice. You know, this his voice, his smooth voice. You've heard it on commentary all along, the Serie A matches this season, in past seasons. He's also an interpreter. Yeah, welcome to the channel, Patrick. How's it going?
Thank you, Rahul. Yeah, very good. Thank you. What a lovely introduction.
Oh yeah, no, I'm really so excited about this because I'm sure a lot of people like me have been hearing your voice, so it's just putting a face to the voice. When I first started following you on Twitter a while ago, it's just nice to put a face to the voice. How's it going anyway today? Is it Good Friday? How are you enjoying that?
Yeah, it's been all right. It's an unusual Good Friday, because Easter's so often about spending time with friends and family, particularly the latter here in Italy. So ordinarily I'd go down to Naples, where my girlfriend's from, but not this time around. So it's just a weekend of Serie A ahead of me, which is nice. So we've got 10 games across Easter Saturday, and then I work on the highlight show and all that sort of stuff. So that's probably a neat segue into what we're here to talk about anyway.
Yeah, it's been a long international break. It's almost been 3 weeks. I think it was this one, especially for Inter fans, because we haven't got to watch Inter for a while because the Sassuolo match obviously was delayed or postponed due to the COVID outbreak in the Inter camp, the international break in between. So us Inter fans are happy. We're hungry. We're thirsty to watch our team back, and first match back against a tricky team. Mihailovic's Bologna, not a whipping boy, or like a weak team of the Serie A. They're bang on, sort of in mid table at the moment, I think, which is what we expect from them. What do you make of this return of Inter to the Serie A? What do you make of Bologna?
Well, you're absolutely right. It has been 3 weeks for Inter. I mean, it's been a standard international break of just 2 weeks, that one weekend in between where we didn't play any Serie A action. But it has been 3 weeks for Inter. I think it'll be 20 days because... No, it'd be exactly 3 weeks, excuse me, because it's Saturday to Saturday, so the Sassuolo game postponed. I thought it was quite interesting because Sassuolo have had a lot of their games impacted by COVID-19. Torino and then latterly Inter, and De Zerbi spoke in his press conference earlier today, and he said, that they've basically taken a precautionary measure. So that's nothing new for them, but obviously for Inter it is difficult because it's always hard after an international break in any case, but let alone when you have an extra week off. And now the fixtures are going to be coming thick and fast. So you don't really know, to be honest, because players go away, they come back possibly with illness and injury and niggles, and now we have the extra added dimension of COVID-19 and players possibly testing positive for COVID. We've had an outbreak in the Italy camp as well. So, De Rossi, Vialli, players too, Bonucci. So there are a few question marks, I think, surrounding this game for Inter, and we also need to factor in the kickoff time. Inter play later than anyone else, and that's not necessarily easy when Milan have already cut the gap from 9 to 6 by virtue of the Sassuolo game being postponed, as you mentioned. There's scope for Milan to beat Sampdoria at home in that lunchtime kickoff, and all of a sudden you go out the Dallara in the evening kickoff, and you're only 3 points clear at the top, albeit with 2 games in hand, one of which you're just about to play. But it's a cliche, but a bird in the hand is worth 2 in the bush, as they say. And Bologna are tricky customers. I've done them quite a few times this season, and that's the real thing I like about my job is I do 2 games a weekend, so it means I do get to see all of Serie A and in on several occasions. And they're such a strange side; they concede far too many goals, which is bizarre given that they're coached by someone who is such a good defender. In the shape of Siniša Mihajlović, but their front four is absolutely brilliant. Between Barrow and Soriano, now Sansone is coming back in, and of course Palacio, who Inter fans know all too well. And even when you don't necessarily have those players, I'm sure we'll get to it, but admittedly this game is at the Dallara where Inter have a good record. But if you look at the games between Inter and Bologna at San Siro, there was that winning goal for Santander, Mihajlovic's first game in charge. I actually did that one. That was when he took over from Pippo Inzaghi, which tells you how long ago that was. And then of course there was Musa Juara, who scored that goal against Inter, who was absolutely brilliant in that match and has barely been seen or heard from since. They farmed him out on loan for the first half. He is very young, and he's since come back and hasn't featured much at all. So it's a weird one. I think it shows how far Inter have come, because this time last season, they might not have necessarily been back-to-back. I think they were probably back-to-back home games. I remember Sassuolo with that late goal from Gian Giacomo Magnani. I think that was probably his only goal for Sassuolo. And then the Giuara one, I think they were both at San Siro, and Inter just shot themselves in the foot. Admittedly, they were playing catch-up in the title race.
And that Gagliardini miss.
Of course, who could forget? Yeah, there were memes aplenty about that one, to be fair. But so I think it shows how far Inter have come, in the sense that a year on, you're playing these same two sides from the same part of the country, albeit in completely different circumstances. And I think, obviously, I read a lot of the Italian press, and there is still the tendency here to look at Juventus as the benchmark for Inter. How far are the Nerazzurri clear of the Bianconeri? And if they are 10 points clear, then they're probably on course to win the title, which is a bit disparaging to Milan, and it's a slightly risky strategy, because I think they've really bounced back well, since losing the derby, since losing that game to Spezia in shock circumstances, albeit they did lose to Napoli, lest we forget. So it's a tricky one, to be honest. I think Inter should be okay on the basis that Conte's side defend very well. Bologna's main strength comes in that front four. Bologna never keep clean sheets. At one stage this season, across 2 seasons, they went more than a season's worth of matches without keeping a clean sheet, which is doing a slight disservice to Skorupski, who I think is brilliant on his day. So I definitely think Inter will score. Do I see Bologna outscoring Inter? No. I think the only potential banana skin could be maybe dropping 2 points, a draw at the Dallara, which in the grand scheme of things, provided Inter then go and beat Sassuolo, would probably be okay. I think if you take 4 points from those 2 matches, then you're probably where you need to be.
Yeah. Let me just put up the Inter team, share my screen with you. We can talk through that's what the Sky Sport in Italy predicted the lineup to be. Can you see that?
I can indeed, yep.
Lovely stuff. So the usual, of course, we know what Conte is all about now, the 3-5-2. De Vrij, I've heard he's, only took part in training. I think Conte said in his press conference today, he only took part in training yesterday. So he's probably not going to make it for the match. So it looks like it could be Mr. Frog, Mr. Ranocchia stepping in centre-back position. Midfield should be as usual with Eriksen, Brozovic and Barella. But as you said, there are some doubts with the COVID outbreak in the Italy camp. I think the COVID test came negative for all the Inter's Italy players. So they should be okay, but there are some doubts, because they're saying that some of the Sassuolo are stopping some of their players from playing. Is that what I've heard? Is that correct?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, I'm actually doing Sassuolo's game tomorrow against Roma. So they had 4 players on international duty. Caputo, albeit, who travelled back earlier because he picked up an injury, so he's out injured anyway. Berardi is also out injured and is doubtful not only for the Inter game next week, which will be of some relief to Nerazzurri fans given his record against Inter, but then the other 2 were Gianmarco Ferrari, who's been a recent inclusion to the Azzurri squad, and Manuel Locatelli, who's arguably one of the best deep lying midfielders in Italy at this moment in time. They've both been left out of the squad, even though they tested negative, because there has been that outbreak of COVID-19 cases in the Italy camp. So it's quite a sort of wise, responsible, firm decision from Sassuolo, and they've come out and spoken about that. De Zerbi said as much in his press conference, and they are trying to send out a message, I think, to the league by doing that. And admittedly, it is a bold decision, and they have had good results this season. When they've been missing some of their big hitters. I remember I did them at Napoli. They won 2-0, and they were missing Berardi, Caputo, Juricic, and Boga, if I'm not mistaken, going off memory there. So it'll be an interesting one. I think Inter's players have tested negative. The big difference is it's a lot easier to leave out 2 key players, as they have done with Ferrari and Locatelli, who are part of the spine of that team, when you're not necessarily challenging for a top 4 finish or the Scudetto, Conte is very pragmatic. Inter are very pragmatic. The rules are there. If the players come back, they test positive. And you try and tell the likes of Bastoni and Barella, and even possibly Sensi, who we might see for some portion of the game, that they can't be involved on the basis that it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I guess technically the way that the virus sort of manifests itself in terms of symptoms, there are all these protocols about self-isolation periods and so on and so forth. But I think the players, provided they have those tests, they're cleared to do it. But maybe that doesn't necessarily preclude them from then testing positive later on this weekend or next week. It is such a difficult situation. And I think the clubs are in a really difficult position. But naturally, if these players are representing their country and it's a big national team in the shape of Italy, they're going to be some of your key players and you have to pick them, to be honest. Exactly. It's like I said, it's easier for Sassuolo to do that because they're in 8th position and they're pretty much on course for their target, and they won't start as favourites against Roma. For Inter, who are favourites against Bologna, who are trying to defend a lead at the top of the table, every point counts, every player matters. And so the idea of voluntarily leaving out the likes of Bastoni, especially if you're going to be without Stefan de Vrij, and possibly even doing without Barella, who's arguably been your best player this season, although there have been so many candidates for that, and that comes with being top of the league. I think it'll be very hard to make an argument for that, to be honest.
Yeah, so we can assume for now that we're going to go with the Italian players in there. So pretty much, I would say, apart from De Vrij, that's pretty much Inter's strongest lineup now. This is the lineup that's provided Inter with the 8 wins in a row. Before it was, delayed. It could have continued. We don't know what would have happened in the Sassuolo match, but we're still on that 8-win streak at the moment. So I'm very happy to continue with the exact same team. I think Skriniar was the only guy who was kind of took to the, used as much as possible by his national team. I think he played 90 minutes in all 3 matches, whereas everyone else, I think Lukaku was rested for the last one. I think Eriksen came on as a substitute in the last one. So Brozovic was rested in the last Croatia game too. So I'm pretty happy overall with this international break. The South Americans, obviously, we know they didn't even go off. So Lautaro Martinez and Alexis Sanchez should be in good shape. So overall, I'm pretty happy with that lineup. There was one question from Brady who came in and said, obviously the sweet prince Stefano Sensi, who performed. I think officially now he's got more minutes for Italy than he has for Inter this year anyway in 2021. What do you make of his? Like, I love him as a player, but it's getting to a point where now it's getting very hard to accommodate him in the squad in general. He's not even proving to be useful as a substitute. I feel like Conte's lost faith in him just physically. Just feels like he can't even throw him on as a substitute with fear of him getting injured. But what do you think Sensi can mount a challenge for that Eriksen left centre mid spot, or maybe even Brozovic's spot or Barella's spot? What do you think of Sensi until the end of this season and going forward?
I like Sensi. I think that the issue he has now is it's very hard to change a winning team. I know that sounds like a bit of a cliche, but it's rare, isn't it? It's sort of unusual and counterintuitive because ordinarily, coaches are constantly bemoaning the fact if a player went on international duty, then they came back injured, they can't use them. Whereas you've almost got the opposite situation is being true here, where Sensi's played minutes for Italy. He's even scored a goal, and he's coming back into the side, and now he's suddenly in contention. He's almost proven that he can feature for a portion of the game. We've seen him a bit more in 2021. It's frustrating because he really hit the ground running at the start of last season. Plus, he was scoring goals almost in every game, which you knew wasn't a sustainable run. It was just a purple patch for him. I remember he scored on his debut in that 4-0 win over Lecce. What a game that was, by the way. Feels like a lifetime away now, 65,000 in at San Siro. But it's a very tricky one because Eriksen has really taken his chance. I know Gagliardini's a sort of controversial figure amongst Inter fans. He's much maligned. Personally, I think he's perfect for when you play against sort of mid to lower table teams. He comes in, he can often pitch in with a goal. He's, provided he doesn't try and hit those 60-yard crossfield balls, which rarely come off. I think he's actually very good at what he does, breaking up play, winning the ball back. But getting back to Sensi, he has to sort of prove himself. And like you said, for as long as it's still this season and Inter are going down the stretch and trying to maintain this title push, it is difficult to throw someone in and say, prove your fitness and we're going to sort of bed you in. It would be a lot easier to do that. So it is a tricky one to know, to be honest, because I think he was on a 2-year loan deal with I can't remember if it was an option or a sort of a compulsory purchase agreement, but either way, it becomes difficult. You know, if you're into, you think, well, does this guy have a future? We need someone to play week in, week out, especially with that vigorous training regime that Conte has, which has been spoken about at length. The fact that it is a very intense brand of football as well. So you need everyone to be on board with that. I really like Sensi, but I'm wondering whether he might be better suited to a club like Roma, to be honest. And that's not, I don't mean any offence to the Giallorossi. I just think he might be a bit more suited to that style of play, as opposed to necessarily being one of Conte's soldiers, because ultimately that's what they are, really.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I was talking with people on Twitter for a while now, and I think maybe going back to Sassuolo with De Zerbi. De Zerbi was on Bobo TV last week, and he was still talking about how much he loves Sensi, and he was comparing him to Iniesta. So I could see that happening, because I don't really see many clubs being willing to kind of take a gamble on him now, because that injury record is getting pretty serious now. So it's going to be difficult in the summer. So it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, as you said, and a lot of Inter fans, we still really like him as a player, but it gets to a point where it's like, okay, what can we actually do with you? Can your legs actually function for 30 minutes? Can you give us something without getting injured? And some people were also, saying that it could be a mental block, because when you start to get so many injuries, you go into tackles differently, you play differently. But with Italy, he seemed to be back to his best in that last match.
Absolutely. Maybe just playing with a weight off his shoulders as well. A change is as good as a rest. God, I'm coming out with all the cliches today. But, it is a change of scenery, and you are playing with different people and, with different teammates, and you do have to prove yourself and come in. And I don't know, maybe Mancini's getting a bit more out of him at this moment in time than Conte necessarily is. But and also there's the standard of opposition. Again, no disrespect to Lithuania, but it's easier to throw him, and albeit that game was goalless at the break, he came straight on. I think there was a deflection on the strike, but he came in, he made something happen, he got the goal, so that's to his credit. And who's to say he can't do something likewise, play a similar role for Inter if there are those games, because teams are going to sit deep and force Inter to try and break them down, and that hasn't always necessarily been their strength. And if that happens, you might need someone to try and come on and unlock defences. I know Vidal's still out injured, but apart from that, it's pretty much clean bill of health. We've seen Vecino come back to form recently, albeit then he picked up COVID, but I think he's since tested negative. So everything's falling into place for Inter in terms of personnel being available. So that's going to make Sensi's task even harder. But you would never want to wish suspensions or injury upon any of your teammates, but it might almost take that. But lest we forget, Inter are playing a midweek game next week against Sassuolo, and then there's still two more midweek rounds left this season, which is why it makes me laugh when you get some fans of rival clubs saying, Inter are so lucky. The only reason they're clear at the top, they're on this winning run, is because they don't play in Europe. It's like, well, yeah, they were trying to go through in Europe. They went out. It's a black mark on their season, but now they're making the best of challenging on one front in particular. But the difference, I suppose, is that Inter were able to benefit from having one game a week in a period when all of their rivals were playing more than one game a week with those midweek matches in Europe. So that's the big difference, I suppose. Whereas now, when the two midweek rounds of Serie A coming up between now and the end of the season, when they actually arrive, all of the other teams will be in action as well. So it's less of an advantage and less of a disadvantage for Inter from that score. But we'll know a lot more, I think, after the game at the Dallara on Saturday, and then especially after the game at San Siro on Wednesday, that unusual kickoff time of 6:45 local. So that'll be a weird one.
Yeah, that's a weird time.
That is because it can't clash with the Champions League. It's a Champions League night, so that's why. And that's also why Juventus Napoli are playing exactly the same kickoff time, which is not good for fans of Serie A that probably wanted to see both of those games, which would never have clashed, given that they belong to completely separate match days. But you've got your pick, really. You can either watch the league leaders against their bogey team, or you can watch Juve Napoli, which is tasty, and then go straight into watching Champions League. So it's going to be good Wednesday.
Yeah, good Wednesday for football fans. Just going back to the match preview, we can just finish the match preview and then we can go on questions and whatever. As you said, Bologna, in-form team at the moment. They're in the last 6 matches, they're 5th in the league in terms of form. Very inconsistent team. They've gone on win streaks and then go on 2 losing streaks. But overall, they've definitely picked up form recently, because I felt like Mihajlovic was underachieving at the start of the season with this squad. But I think now they're at the 11th place, are they, or 12th place? So they're pretty much where they should be. And in terms of their team, this is their team they played on the last match day. So I'm not sure whether it will be the team that they will play this time round. But I think this is pretty much their strongest team. You could probably put Skov Olsen instead of Orsolini on the right hand side. I think that's pretty much their starting 11. They usually switch around with the striker, with Palacio. Sometimes they play Musa Barrow up there. But, it's a decent team. But in terms of guys to watch from their team, I would, Soriano is their top scorer this season and second highest assister. And I'm always surprised that big teams are not going for Roberto Soriano. It always surprises me. Such a quality player to me. So I'm always surprised why he's still at Bologna. And then obviously the ex, you always have to watch out for the ex-Inter player, Rodrigo Palacio, the rat tail god, obviously Musa Barrow. So what do you make of Bologna? Who do you think Inter should be watching out for?
Yeah, they're a very good team, and your friend and mine, Nima, as well, is a big fan of Matthias Svanberg as well. So
it's just because he's Swedish.
But no, I think Musa Barrow is perfect for that role, playing on the wide left, cutting inside. I mean, he can be frustrating because when he's hot, he's absolutely brilliant, and then he can just go cool. But he does tend to raise his game against big teams. I remember he absolutely put Roma to the sword last season. So he can be very effective. Palacio is still a brilliant finisher, and he's a clever player. He's never really relied too much on sort of searing pace, and especially in the last few years, he's still been able to be competitive. And he reminds me a lot of another Inter player, Goran Pandev, in that he knows exactly what his role is. He knows where to be. He knows how many touches to take. He knows how to finish. So he'll definitely be a threat. But I think you nailed it as well. Skov Olsen is a quality player, and Mihajlovic tends to prefer him to Orsolini when they're playing a bigger team because he offers a bit more defensively. He's a bit more diligent, whereas Orsolini can make something happen. But Skov Olsen was on great form on international duty. And yeah, the big one, I think, is Soriano that you mentioned, who travelled away with Italy and was left on the bench for 3 straight games, something that Mihajlovic actually spoke out about in his press conference earlier today.
Oh, really?
He had a go at Mancini. He said, obviously he was assistant to Mancini at Inter, lest we forget. And he said, if I were in Soriano's shoes, I'd have told him where to go. So it's a good line from Mihajlovic. He often comes up with them. So I think Soriano will be keen to show what he can do, to be honest. Like you said, it's not really happened for him at a big club. He had that weird spell at Villarreal, then was Sampdoria and Torino. He's played his best football under Mihajlovic, hence why he's played for him at several clubs. And he's having the best season of his career. He's coming into his prime. He'll be frustrated having not featured for Italy. He's coming up against international teammates as well, who they've been playing against on the training ground. I don't know what Roberto Mancini's plans are this weekend, but if he is watching that, he'll definitely have a point to prove, and he'll be fired up by Mihajlovic's comments because they'll be all over the press tomorrow morning. They're already doing the rounds on the internet. So I think if you're able to keep Soriano quiet because he's so good between the lines and making those late bursts, and if you're also able to marginalize Barrow, and that job is going to be mainly down to Hakimi, to be honest, and Skriniar, who's been absolutely fabulous in that right-sided centre-back role. But Inter also need to be able to, in some ways it suits. In some ways, Palacio is the perfect player for Ranocchia to come up against. If you were to be doing without De Vrij, then it's probably this weekend because Ranocchia will know Palacio inside out, having played together in the past. Ranocchia's, I think he's Inter's longest serving player. I think he's the only survivor from that last trophy win, 2011, the Coppa Italia. So that definitely helps. And as I've alluded to earlier, Palacio being 38, I think he is now, is not the most. Might even be 39. I can't remember if he's in 82 or in 83. Anyway, he's not the most mobile striker. So I think if you're able to have Ranocchia on him, and I thought it was really interesting what Ranocchia said about when Lukaku came in and how he just got Ranocchia to work with Lukaku. Conte, that was, got Ranocchia to work with Lukaku on the training ground and just tried to, say, pin Ranocchia every time and spin him. And I think that's been a real benefit to Lukaku's game. So Ranocchia knows what he's doing. He's an experienced customer. And the best thing is his first team opportunities are so limited that when he comes in, he tends to shine. He tends to thrive. We've seen him in matches like against Genoa. Conte picks and chooses the games that he's involved in. He hasn't had the luxury of doing that this time. And I think they've dubbed it, it's one of those clunky 3-letter acronyms. I think it's SDB or something they've come up for, isn't it? With the Skriniar, De Vrij and Bastoni. I've seen that in the Italian media, which is really forced. But I think there was a time when they played about 10 or 11 games together. And that's when Inter were barely conceding any goals. The interesting thing, and you mentioned it earlier, is it's 8 straight wins. That equals the longest winning streak of the season, which came to an end at Sampdoria on Epiphany. So you're almost hoping that you can go one better at the Dallara, because then you've got Sassuolo just coming around the corner. So I think Inter will be favourites, and I think the way that the team's set up, Inter are still joint top scorers in the league. They're also really solid defensively, albeit missing not even arguably, they're missing their best defender. I know there are a lot of people who are massive fans of Skriniar, but I think in terms of what he provides, in terms of his cool head, I think De Vrij is Inter's best defender. So that's the only question mark, really. But yeah, it's going to be a strong side, and Bologna have got better defensively since they brought in Adama Sumaoro, or Sumaoro, as our French colleagues say, but it's quite not really easy. It doesn't trip off the tongue on commentary, so you sort of make a concession with that. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it's the usual thing for Inter. Keep it tight, score the first goal, and you won't be troubled by Bologna. If Inter were to concede early and Bologna were to get some belief, there could be scope for another upset with Mihajlovic at the helm.
Yeah, spot on, Patrick. And quick one on the Handanovic. He probably will be. I think he probably will be starting. I think Conte said he was the first one to recover from the COVID, so he should be fine to start. But what do you make of Radu? I'm sure you probably had a chance to cover some Genoa matches when Radu was playing. I felt like he deserved that chance at some point. Even in the Coppa Italia. What do you make of that whole situation? Is he really that bad that he can't get a chance even in the Coppa Italia?
I was a massive fan of Andre Radu, actually. Yeah, when he was at Genoa, he did a really good job. Then it was bizarre last season because, well, Genoa were in a relegation battle, and they were even worse off than they are this season. I mean, they've stabilised a lot under Ballardini, but it went right down to the wire last season, didn't it? With Lecce,
yeah.
And they plumped for, as soon as they sensed the opportunity, they could take Perin on loan, and that was a no-brainer, really. Do you know what I mean? It's just like you can't have Szczesny, Buffon, and Perin all in the same squad, basically. So good ties between Genoa and Juventus. We don't really need to touch upon that, but there was the opportunity to bring back Perin to Genoa, who'd been such a good servant for them. He was a senior player, and he was brilliant, and that proved to be the right decision. I remember at the time it felt very unfair because Radu had been superb in goal for Genoa, but he's sort of a headline maker. He makes those outrageous saves. He's a really good shot stopper, but you can't really. Between him and Perin, I can understand why Genoa did so, and Perin has since gone from strength to strength, and he's a very good goalkeeper. Mm-hmm. That said, I completely agree with you. The Coppa Italia has been a competition for most clubs, not only the big clubs, all clubs basically, to play the second string. Especially, I think the tricky thing comes with Inter always going to be seeded because they're always going to finish in the top 8. So you come in at the last 16 stage. And there was that tricky trip away to Fiorentina, at least on paper. Well, it proved that way as well. There was that last-minute goal from Lukaku to send Inter through. Then you had Milan next match, and then suddenly you're in a two-legged semi-final against Juventus. So Inter had a really tricky run in the Coppa Italia. So I can understand why Handanovic played, plus he's the club captain. So you're asking your team not only, and the defence, not only to play behind a different goalkeeper, but then you're saying, okay, who's going to take the armband? And And so Inter probably dodged a bullet with that game being called off against Sassuolo, not having to do without Handanovic. I suppose it would have been last season. I can't even remember when we had, or was it the year before when we had that spell when Padelli came in for a few games because Handanovic, I think he hurt his hand. Was he out for 6 weeks? I'm trying to remember what that must have been.
Because he played in the derby. I remember Padelli messing up in the derby. And then
that must have been 1920, I think, because 18-19 was my last season at Inter TV, and that was the season when Handanovic was given the captaincy on Valentine's Day in Vienna, the rapid trip, when Icardi gate really came bubbling up to the surface. So yeah, I think it must have been last season. And
it was
right. Yeah, it was the derby. Yeah.
There's people are calling out for Radu to start. It seems like, people were the thing is, I think the thing was people were quite unhappy with Handanovic's performances at the start of the season, quite rightly. But then now Handanovic has stepped up to the point where, Radu's got no chance unless, it was going to be that match against Sassuolo if it was going to be played, because Handanovic got COVID, and then it seems like he's just Radu is just cursed. He can't get a look in from Conte, but we'll see. I agree, he's got some talent, but I don't think he's the long-term answer to the position anyway. So no sleep.
The long-term answer plays for Udinese, and that's been staring everyone in the face. I mean, I've done Udinese. I must have done Udinese 10 to 12 times this season. Yeah. He's absolutely brilliant. Juan Musso is. It's hard for me to say he's the best goalkeeper in Serie A because there are so many good ones. I think Juventus might still have the best goalkeeper in Serie A, to be honest, albeit he didn't cover himself in glory with that free kick against Porto. But Musso, there are very few that are better than him. I think he's a bit more consistent than Cragno, who's obviously up there as well. Golini's had a wobble recently. They're just so... Donnarumma would be someone that everyone would take in a heartbeat, but he's not going to move from Milan to Inter. I think if he goes anywhere, he'll either go to Juventus or he'll move abroad. But this is an Inter focus, so let's move on from that one. But Juan Musso, if I had to name one successor for Inter, it would be Musso. I think he's a 94, so he'll turn 27 later this year. Perfect age. You could get 10 years out of him, a bit like Inter did with Handanovic, to be honest. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I always say with the goalkeeper is there's one position where I feel like you need to watch someone over a whole season, and I don't really want to watch Udinese, which is quite rarely. I usually focus on Rodrigo De Paul. But he's got the whole, the stature. I always say he looks like a proper goalkeeper. He looks athletic. With Cragno, I love Cragno, but he's short. I think he's 185 centimeters, which is quite short for a goalkeeper. Which you can't control.
It didn't stop Julio Cesar, who I don't think was the tallest either.
No, Casillas was on the tallest, but in general, that's the only worry I have with Cragno. But for me, it's between Musso and Cragno. I think especially with Cagliari, we've got good relations. We keep giving them players for free. So I hope that one time they'll repay the favor at some point.
Godin, Nangolan, there's been plenty, to be fair.
Yeah. So I agree with you.
Zappa as well, I guess, is ex-Inter too. But there you go. He's doing
with well. Dragowski. A lot of Inter fans like Dragowski, but I feel like they watch Dragowski when he plays against Inter, which he seems like he always performs really well against Inter. But
he's outstanding, Dragowski. Yeah. No, he is the real deal as well. You can question the beard a bit, but in terms of his ability, I think he needs to work on his feet a little bit.
Yeah.
But he commands his box. He's really good at coming for crosses. He makes some outrageous saves. I'm trying to remember, was it Dragowski that saved the penalty in Inter Empoli, that game when Nangolan got the winner? Okay, that's maybe why Inter fans want him. It's one of those where if you can't beat him, join him, sort of thing. So that would make sense.
Yeah. And then let me just share my screen once again quickly so we can finish off with the preview. So what are we saying for score prediction tomorrow? Inter versus Bologna, Bologna versus Inter.
I'm going to go for 2-1 Inter. I think it might be another tight one, a bit like the Torino game. It might take a late goal. I think it could be cagey, heading for a 1-1. Milan are getting excited. having beaten Sampdoria earlier in the day, and then maybe not Lautaro this time, maybe Lukaku or someone like Barella to bail out the Nerazzurri later on.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going for a 2-1 as well, because I feel like there's always that lethargicness after international break. The players have been together for a while. Some of them might be still a little bit jet lagged or tired. And I keep predicting this, but I feel like Eriksen will get his first goal finally. We're waiting for that first goal this season, so I feel like he will get one. And
he got a big one in the cup, lest we forget.
Yeah. In open play.
Sure. I get absolutely.
Yeah, and then one from Lautaro. I think he's got some nice rest over the last couple of weeks. I feel like he'll be raring to go. And that's pretty much it for the match preview. You got a few more minutes to go through some questions, Patrick?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great. These ones are more. I'll start off with my personal questions. From your time at Inter TV. You worked there for a year, did you, for Inter TV?
Yeah, it was 18 months. I joined in December 2017 and worked until the end of the 2018-19 season. So 18 months.
Yeah. So how was it? How was it working for Inter? Like, how could you describe to the viewers, like, what's it like working for Inter? Is it like a massive corporation where you're talking to like hundreds of people whenever you have to do something, or is it quite small knit? Like, is there a family feel?
Yeah, no, it's fabulous. It was a real honor, as a privilege, I think, to work for any big club, let alone for a massive international institution, working abroad. I was so excited about the job that I'd literally moved from Milan in August 2017 to Lisbon, where I'd previously lived as well. I'd done a bit of work for Benfica, but I'd been there a week, and a guy who later became my boss, not initially, but he's one of the key figures in the intermedia house, a guy called Roberto Monzani. He phoned me up and said, are you in Milan? Do you want to come and work for Inter? And I said, I wish you'd phoned me a week ago. But it took me 2 months to sort my stuff out. That's why I started in December of that year, so midway through the 2017-18 season. And it was a fabulous experience. It is a big company. There's a lot of employees now, several hundred, and the club has grown immensely off the pitch in particular, with huge investment in infrastructure. There's been a big refurbishment of the training ground at Piano Gentile, so now the Suning Training Centre, it used to be the Angelo Moratti. And also, big shiny new head office as well. It's weird, but Inter TV, we were always based out, and to this day, the channel is still based at the training ground, which is fantastic because you get to see the players arriving. You'd see them train in the distance, albeit that was heavily policed. When I was there, we used to have lunch in the restaurant where the players would eat, albeit there would be slightly different times. We'd eat very early on in the working day so as not to disturb them when they came back in from training. But there would be a bit of crossover, and they were all very friendly, and occasionally see some banter and things like that. So that was nice to have an insight into all of that. But the main reason the TV channel is based at the training ground is to have access to players, and so that cameramen can go and film training and all that sort of things. So we had a lot greater proximity to the first team, which is obviously what the club's all about. It's the heartbeat of the team, because we were based there, whereas 95% of the club's employees work at the head offices in Milan city centre. So no, it was a fabulous experience, and I learned so much, and I got to do a load of things on camera, off camera, that I hadn't done before, and it's really helped me since going back to freelancing again in May of 2019.
Yeah, no, fun. Sounds really good. And the show you used to do was quite fun as well. The one where you were traveling. What was it called? I used to watch.
Euro Express. Yeah. No, that was great. When followed the Europa League campaign after. Inter obviously went out. I mean, at least they had the courtesy of finishing third in their Champions League group that season and the following year, lest we forget, with Conte's first season going all the way to the final. This year was a bit of a disappointment, but so I went to Vienna and Frankfurt, and then obviously it all came to an end with that game against Eintracht at San Siro, which was bizarre if you think that Sebre Esposito made his debut as a 16-year-old, I think. Yeah, that was a weird one.
And then one more just from me, and then we can open up to the viewers. Like, make sure you guys are asking your questions, and I'll pick out a few for Patrick to answer. There was already one from Snudges earlier that I'll pick out afterwards, but this one is definitely a personal one. Luciano Spalletti, the shining head. The one of the best coaches Inter have had over the last decade. Definitely, the best we've had post triplete, I would believe, or until Conte came. How is he just as he is, or as he seems, in press conferences, this kind of poetic way of talking, talking in riddles? Is he the same off the camera as he is on camera?
Yeah, he is. He's a wonderful man, to be honest. It's strange. Actually, just coming into his coaching ability, I think he's the most underrated coach Inter have had in recent times, and I think people did such a disservice to him, when they're saying, when they talk about Spalletti, Inter hadn't qualified for the Champions League in 6 years, I think it was. And then, consecutive fourth place finishes. And who cares if they did it by the skin of their teeth on the final day of their season? That's what the essence of the club is all about, albeit they've tried to move away from all of that Pazza Inter stuff these days. No, but he's speaking from, I need to answer this question sort of several different perspectives, really. On a personal level, he's a wonderful man. He's a gentleman. He's very generous. I remember him getting cashmere scarves as a Christmas present for everyone that worked at Appiano Gentile. Wow. whether they were Inter employees or not. He was just very good about things like that. He would come by and see us in the TV channel. He would stop and have a chat. He's very courteous, very good mannered. So that's him on a personal level, and I always had a very good relationship with him as well. I don't know. I think it was sort of the perks of being slightly exotic in that I wasn't Italian and I was foreign, and we got on very well. And then there's the side of him as a communicator. If I had to assess him from the perspective of a conference interpreter, and I had to interpret him on several occasions.
God, it would have been a nightmare for you.
It is a nightmare. He's very, very difficult to understand when he's in a public setting, shall we say, when he's conducting a press conference or an interview. I think he's very guarded and he's worried about what he wants to say. Maybe occasionally he can fall into that trap. I've seen this with Buffon as well. We're trying to sound almost too philosophical. So it was quite tricky to interpret him there. The benefit of the way he speaks, however, is that he does tend to take these long pauses, so at least you have plenty of time to think about things. But then, and just coming finally to a sort of aesthetic level, he's the best dressed sextagenarian I've ever seen. I mean, he's in his 60s. He has got, honestly, the best fashion sense of anyone I've seen of that age, and he is as trim as anyone you'll ever see. I mean, I remember him doing, where you put your legs on those bars and you lie suspended upside down and doing sit-ups. I mean, if you're doing those in your 60s, then you can tell you're in pretty good shape. So I think that speaks a little bit maybe to his vanity, but I only have good things to say about him. Great coach, unfairly, and he's got a lot of character as well, because I don't think you take on that Roma job and have the courage to basically end Totti's career unless you have a lot of character. And he's made enemies with half a city by doing that. And then he took over Inter at a very difficult period, and he conducted himself with great dignity, despite knowing that his time would come to an end after that second season. And I can't wait to see where he ends up next. And I don't think it will be abroad. I don't think he has any ambitions. In fact, I'm fairly sure he has no ambitions to work abroad again. He had that long stint at Zenit successfully. And he's a proud Tuscan. He's a Fiorentina fan. I mean, that job looks absolutely nailed on for him. I don't know why it hasn't happened or if it will happen. Sarri is another potential for that. Again, born in Naples, but he's as Tuscan as they come. And I think the Fiorentina job must be very, very appealing at this moment in time, to be honest. It's a shame what happened with Prandelli with those personal reasons. Yakin is a stopgap till the end of the season. It's a very Italian way of doing things, bringing back someone that's on garden leave, essentially. So I think, it's whether he wants to. I suppose this is probably the last season of his compensation package with Inter. But brilliant coach, wonderful man. and very amusing and yeah, just good company. And I've got very fond memories of him. I'm glad that when I worked at the club, he was the top man. Put it that way.
I'm glad to hear good things about him, because obviously I just know him from the outside, and he just seems, very very enjoyable person to be around. There was one question which I'm not sure whether you can answer or not, but obviously Inter fans are interested in. Do you have any insight of the Icardi drama?
I have no inside knowledge, and even if I did, I wouldn't be at liberty to express it, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it was certainly it kept us guessing, to be honest. I think it kept everyone guessing. So he's moved on. Inter have moved on. They've got the perfect replacement. Lautaro has stepped up as well since Icardi's departure, and I think Icardi probably. It was perfect sort of crossover to have Lautaro's first season there with Icardi still there. I think that probably helped. And you can't really deny what he did at the club. He was prolific and he scored some goals, and he was, in terms of what he did on the pitch, he was a very good captain. And, you're always going to have controversial figures and divisive figures. And these days players come with entourages as well. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to manage that. And the club made a decision, and a strong one. And I think the right one. And we'll see what happens next for Icardi, because I've seen some links with him now being sacrificed by PSG so that they can bump up Mbappe's wages so that he's on a par with Neymar. So things happen very quickly in football. It's a shame his legacy was tainted slightly by the way everything ended. Yeah. But I like to remember Icardi as the player that scored all of those goals, that finished twice as joint capocannoniere, once with Luca Toni, once with Ciro Immobile, and he was brilliant. And I think my favourite moment, probably when I was at Inter for those 18 months, was his volley against Spurs. I mean, obviously the Vecino goal was the winner. But I was commentating on that match, and it was just fantastic. That Asamoah cross that also almost looked like he'd mishit it. I'm still not sure because from that position you would think someone would try and swing the ball in towards the back post, and yet he almost cut it back from the edge of the box. And yet, I know, maybe he did spot Icardi, but the technique to do that on the volley when you're losing 1-0 at home in a game that the fans have been waiting 6 years for, and then you do that, and it gave them all the momentum for them for that amazing Vecino goal. And there's some great memories from that, and of Icardi and of Spalletti, and just that entire crop, really. And it's a wonderful time, wonderful period of my career.
It's good to hear. We got a question for you here, Patrick. I don't know if that such a player exists. You seem to be perfect at pronouncing every player. Who's the most difficult player to pronounce?
Well, there's lots, to be honest. I alluded to one earlier on. I mean, he's in France. They call him Adama Soumaoro, which is 4 syllables. But you can't really do that, and you can't really do it smoothly. And he even scored his first goal for Bologna recently. So I call him Soumaoro, which is probably not right. Well, it's not right. I know it's not right. The other one is the Poles. So I guess technically it's Wojciech Szczęsny, which got me into trouble when I did the Super Cup this year between Juventus and Napoli, because when you're trying to speak quickly or there's a goal-mouth scramble, you try and say that quickly, you get yourself into trouble. So then I thought, why didn't I just call him Szczęsny like everyone else? So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. The other one that I've always been very obstinate about is the Milan central midfielder, whose name is Franck Kessié. He calls himself Kessié, but there's an accent on the E, and every French broadcaster I've worked with has always called him Kessié. And I was at Manchester United recently as a reporter, and there were colleagues there from Canal Plus Afrique, and they were calling him. They interviewed Soilio Meite, and they asked him about what it was like to play alongside another French speaker in the shape of Kessié. So if you ever hear me on a Milan game, which Inter fans probably won't, unless they decide to watch Milan for sort of self-flagellation, then you'll hear me call him Kessié, and I've stuck to that one. But in general, it's the Polish names which can become quite tricky. So I think even technically it's Drągowski, for instance, rather than Dragowski or Dragowski. We had that. Piontek was a real eye-opener for us. I think Piontek was the first instance of people realizing that certain accents on vowels could then add a consonant. There's no N in Piontek, but there's that weird squiggle on the A. And I think there's a similar thing on the A of Drangovski, hence why it's Drangovski rather than Dragovski. But there are lots, and it's a constant challenge, to be honest. And you're always in danger of sounding pretentious as well. So you try and strike the balance between saying them authentically, if you can, and then also not sort of over-egging the pudding and sounding like a bit of an idiot.
Yeah, on one that's always interesting is, I mean, if the player says the way that it's pronounced, I didn't know about the Kessie one because you said Kessie himself calls himself Kessie, so that one's confusing. But the Simon Kjaer, who's said himself that you say it, everyone calls him Kier or Kajer or different ways. So I usually prefer to go with, if the player has said that this is the way you say it, I go with that one.
But even then, you have de Vrij. I mean, it's a very, very minimal difference in the way the Dutch pronounce it between de Vrij and de Vrij, I think, so it is what it is. For many years, he was in Italy, he's Skriniar and he's Perisic, but technically it's Skriniar and Perisic, and unfortunately, you only discover these things as you go along.
When you get hate mail.
Well, not even that, it's when you think to yourself, I'm going to go and... I had one recently, Filip Juricic, whose name is actually Juricic. The D is silent. But I'd been calling him Juricic with a DJ sound for 6 years. So I thought, well, I can't change now, to be honest. So it does become difficult on that. But, there's definitely a right way of doing things. There's definitely a wrong way of doing things. But I think most of the time, colleagues... commentators are trying to do the best they can, and they're trying to strike a balance between making it intelligible to the audience, and also trying to do the player's name justice so you don't offend them. Yeah. And
then we had you worked for a little while whilst Conte was there, right? Did you have any?
I worked for one day with Conte. I conducted his first ever interview when he was. Appointed as Inter head coach. Funnily enough, I delayed my departure from Inter by a day or two, and I did a joint interview with Steven Zhang in English and Conte in Italian. And
when he said no more Pazza Inter.
No more Pazza Inter. Yeah, they were very clear on that score. So, what are my thoughts? I have worked with him in the past. I interpreted for him at Italy, England, which must have been 2015, a game in Turin. I seem to recall Graziano Pellè and Andros Townsend scoring. So I interpreted for him then in an Italy-England game, and I interpreted for him at his unveiling as Chelsea coach. And also I interpreted for Italy throughout Euro 2016, albeit that was remotely. So I've come into sort of brief contact with him. And he's very impressive. He's a winner. He's exactly what Inter need. He's a winner, and they've got their recruitment absolutely spot on. Spalletti was what they needed to grow and to gain more confidence and to get back into the Champions League. And then Conte was what they needed to win domestically again. And Conte might not necessarily be the man to get into competing again in Europe. We shall see. Maybe he wins the league this season, and this time he actually walks as he threatened to do last season. And maybe someone else comes in. And I don't think Inter fans should be too precious about what it says on a coach's CV. And Conte had a big association with Juventus as a player. Yes, as a coach too. But we've seen it throughout history in Italy, especially. Trapattoni coached Juventus and Inter with no problem at all. He had that record-breaking season with the Nerazzurri, 89. So I think someone like Allegri might even be the person to take Inter forward after Conte. I'm not saying that Conte won't be at Inter next season, but I'm saying these days coaches like to work on short projects, especially when they tend to operate like he does, and he's similar to the way Mourinho used to operate, in that get a team, overhaul them 2 or 3 years, maybe a year to bed in, a second year to win, a third year to really, reap all the benefits of what you've put in. And then the players need a sort of fresh approach. You need a bit of a break or whatever. Maybe you take a sabbatical, maybe you go elsewhere. And that could be right. Maybe Conte feels he has unfinished business in England after the way it ended at Chelsea. Maybe he wants to go and coach someone like Paris Saint-Germain, who must be a very appealing project for everyone. So I don't see him, having a dynasty, for want of a better word, to use an American term, at Inter. I don't see him being there 6 or 7 years. But I think such is the size of Inter, and I think the history of the club shows that they're not really cut out for that. I mean, there was that long spell that Mancini had in charge, for instance. But other than that, I think they're best suited to, no one wants to go back to the crazy spells of, Mazzarri and Ranieri and then Stramaccioni and Stefano Vecchi stepping in, and Frank de Boer. No one wants to see that. I think what you want is a coherent project. And sorry, it's got very dark in here. I think that's what you want. And I think where Inter are now, they should be going after the biggest names. And I think the best possible coaches, although I do like Paulo Fonseca at Roma, whatever people say about his record in big matches, the best coaches for big Italian teams are Italian coaches. So Inter don't need to go and get De Zerbi or Italiano or whoever is impressing at lower league sides, or sort of teams lower down in the table rather. Inter need to go and get the best coach on the market. At the moment, they have it in Conte. If Conte wants to move on, or they no longer feel that Conte is the best coach, then they need to go and get the best coach that's available on the market. And that might be Maurizio Sarri. I mean, Sarri could be a wonderful fit for Inter. I mean, the good thing is there's no shortage of good coaches at Inter, in Italy rather. They have a very good coach now. I think the job is Conte's as long as he wants it. I think he knows that, hence why there was that big hoo-ha after the Europa League final. I think he's got what he wanted. He's getting the results that he promised and that his salary warrants. And we'll see what happens at the end of the season. I think it's very exciting, to be honest. It's a very exciting period in Italian football and very exciting times at Inter in general. I mean, as soon as a club is able to break that Juventus run of 9 in a row, I think we could go to I always point to the Premier League, Admittedly, now you've got City winning the league after Liverpool, and then it was City the year before that. Or might have even been Chelsea. I can't recall. No, I think it would have been City before that. Anyway, yeah. I digress. The real appeal of the Premier League has been the fact that over a 5-year period, you could have maybe 3 different teams winning the league, albeit it alternates. There's never the same team winning the league 2 years in a row. And we've seen that with Liverpool last season, and City are going to win it this term. And I think if we're able to get that in Italy, historically, it's 3 teams. It's Juventus 36 titles, that's 36. Inter 18 and Milan 18. And, then we've got the southern teams occasionally, Roma have got 3 and Lazio have got 2 and all sorts, Napoli have got 2. But those are very isolated things. So historically, traditionally, there are 3 giants in the Italian game. They are currently the top 3 in the league, and that is only going to serve the league very well going forward. And so whether it's Inter that win the league or Milan that win the league, this is not an anti-Juventus discourse, although I'm sure that would be very popular on this particular channel. Yeah, but the sooner someone else wins the league that's not Juventus, the better. And then Juventus might come back and win 4 in a row after that. But it's going to help the league in terms of appeal, in terms of interest, in terms of the projects at other clubs and how they're able to build. And it will also give belief to Napoli, who came so close. It will give belief to Roma, who came close as well. And if it's Inter that are going to take the crown, then so be it.
Perfect. I couldn't have put it better myself. And then we'll finish off just the last one, Patrick. Thank you for all your time. Just the one last one. I think it's an interesting one to finish everything on. Contenders for Player of the Year in the Serie A?
Wow. Okay, there's so many. I would rule out Ronaldo, which seems a bit harsh given that he's got 23 goals and he's top scorer in the league. I think Lukaku has been fabulous, and much of that is due to the fact that so often people claimed he wasn't a big game player. I mean, he's played 4 Milan derbies, he's scored in every single one of them. You have to look at Inter players first and foremost because they're top of the league, and you have to think the Player of the Year comes from the team that will win the league. And superstition aside, the Nerazzurri in the box seat to win the title. So, Barella's been brilliant again. Skriniar's come back to his best. De Vrij's been amazing. There are so many. Lautaro Martinez hasn't got the same goals as Lukaku, but on his day, he's absolutely out of this world. But then you can look at other teams. Udinese at times appear a one-man team with Rodrigo de Paul. He's absolutely fabulous. Milinkovic-Savic and Luis Alberto swap roles. Last year, Luis Alberto got all the assists and no goals, and Milinkovic-Savic was the opposite. They've swapped around. It's a shame that Napoli have faded, because I thought Insigne started the season like a man possessed. But Ibrahimovic has just been astonishingly good. Milan shouldn't be anywhere near where they are in the league, I don't think. And he didn't even play for several matches. Donnarumma's been outstanding. There are so many candidates. I know I'm not really answering the question. You've put me on the spot here. Simone Bastoni of Spezia has been wonderful. There have just been so many good players, and I'm trying to think now. I'm really sort of racking my brains. I can tell you who the player of 2021 is. That's Dusan Vlahovic of Fiorentina. And in terms of player of the season, I'm going to have to go for an Inter player. And I think if he maintains his form and Inter win the league, and he finishes with 30 goals, because he should. Well, no, maybe not 30. We've got 10 games to go. If he finishes at least 26, 27, Romelu Lukaku for me would be the player of the year in Serie A.
Yeah, I agree. I think, it's between Lukaku, Barella, and then, the other players you mentioned for the other teams. I think Kessié, I think he's a good shout for Milan.
Absolutely.
But if we perform the way that we have been performing, and Lukaku takes us to the Scudetto, and what do you make of this? People were talking about if Lukaku takes Inter to the Scudetto, and then potentially with Belgium he goes on to the final, or even wins the Euro with Belgium. Do you think he's in for a shout for the Ballon d'Or?
He would be, but it all comes down to who wins the Champions League as well. Unfortunately, I think. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Belgium are definitely potential winners of the Euro. But we need to see what happens in the Champions League. I think it's such a big factor in that. Obviously, like you said, when there is a major tournament, it does tend to skew things. So the Euros will be important as well. But if he leads Inter to the title, a first title in 11 years, a first non-Juventus title in a decade, he finishes as second top scorer. I think it's going to be hard for him to overhaul Ronaldo, who's just going to be more focused than ever on winning the Capocannoniere. And then he's able to get to the final, at least, of the Euros, like you said. Then why not? I mean, we saw Luka Modric, didn't we, win the Ballon d'Or? So I think there's potential for it. And I think it would be deserved. And I think he's a much, much better player than people give him credit for. I think he's finally getting the plaudits he deserves. I think that last spell in England at Manchester United did his image in the media a lot of damage. But it was blown out of proportion, and I think we're seeing what a wonderful player he is and how devastating he can be.
Perfect, Patrick. Thank you so much for coming on this channel.
My pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Enjoyable episode. Is there anything you want to plug before you leave?
No, I don't think so. Keep tuning into to Serie A. I do 2 games a week on the World Feed. I post what my assignments are on Twitter. I've just got 1 game this weekend because they're all playing on Saturday. But I've got some good games coming up. The next time I'm doing Inter is on Wednesday, so people will be hearing me there for Inter Sassuolo, and then I believe I'm doing Spezia Inter later on this month. So make sure you listen to those. And
Great.
follow me on Twitter, Patrick Kendrick, 1K in the middle. And I'm always happy to. Perfect. Always happy to answer any questions and engage. And I love the Serie A community. So thank you for having me on. It was a pleasure.
And your YouTube channel, if anyone's interested in becoming an interpreter or a commentator, Patrick's got great content on there to guide you or give any tips and help.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Everyone, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll see you tomorrow for the post-match review, which hopefully will be positive. Ciao ragazzi, forza Inter.